that do not depend on having gangs of uniformed armed thugs who are in particular responsible for doing that. You know, a fig for, as Robert Burns said, right? A fig for those by law protected. Liberty's a glorious feast. Courts for judges were erected. Churches built to please the priest.
Anybody else?
Do you believe that a successful society, will grant? I'll just want a second to talk after you. I don't really want to pose it in a question.
What do you think of an alternative for murderers and people with violent crime, instead of being put in prison, to have them put in exile?
I don't know. Figure it out. I'm not here to give you all these answers. I'd like to know what you think, you collectively. I think the commitment to abolish prison will force people to rethink other ways of dealing with social problems. That's pretty much what I have to say. Beyond that, I don't have much to offer.
I know that used to be the way of the past.
Yeah. Well, that was the American Indian way. If you can't live with us, go away and live with yourself.
I have a response. I just actually have a response to. I wanted to comment on people asking what are we going to do with all these problems. A lot of people are in prison because they're broke, they're starving, they don't have education. So that's the reason the gangs rise and things like that, is because there's a need for them, because the society in which they live in doesn't provide for them in the way that they need to survive. So they do what they can. So I think if you abolish prisons and you invest that money back in education and things that are going to actually help the people that really need it, you're going to see a serious decrease in crime and things that are going to warrant people being put in prison.
If I could just respond, I agree in the spirit with that, but you know, after we get rid of prisons, I'm also in favor of abolishing schools. I'm not in favor of doing away with education. I think life should be a lifelong education. But any high school kid knows that what he spends she spends 6 or 7 hours doing in school, he or she could learn in an hour on his own. Those schools are just prisons for the young. I teach at one. I earn my living that way. Life is full of contradictions.
Thank you very much for. Can you hear me now? Oh, excellent. Thank you very much for your talk so far. I pose a question to you and to anyone else who can hear me, which is that the prison system is a system that was an alternative to ways of punishing people that existed beforehand, like executions and expulsions. And the reason why, well, the Iroquois didn't have prisons was because if someone committed a crime, they were simply expelled. And in our society, where do you expel people to if you were to do that? Because now everywhere is inhabited. And the reason why Europe didn't have prisons until modern times is because every crime was a capital offense. Prison is in fact a reform of an earlier legal system that was worse. So
I'm not sure it was worse. I'm not sure whether a lifetime of torture in an institution is worse than capital punishment. But I would say also that there is a nice history of prisons written by Otto Ruscha and something Kirkheimer, I can't remember the title, in which they connect the rise of prison to the rise of a manufacturing, commercial, capitalistic society. That in fact, before that, people were not necessarily executed. They were sent to work on the galley ships. And the rise of the sailing ship eliminated that need. I think it's much more connected with the rise of the kind of society than simply sort of a well-intentioned reform to try and figure out how to deal with deviance.
What about driving under the front line? What?
Did somebody else have? I saw some hands earlier.
Well, if we have, we have no more questions, if we have a question. Okay. Well, if we have.
Doesn't have to be questions if you all want to, as the teachers say, talk among yourselves.
We're not stopping anything, but I got a comment from the food tent. They just wanted you guys to let you know that there was still plenty of hot food down there. So that's their announcement. Please back on with the show.
They got shrimp.
Indian.
I guess I don't have a question per se, but I wanted to add to the things you were saying about thinking about new worlds and also connecting with people of color communities. There's actually been lots of work done in lots of places in this country and elsewhere to think about how to address what we call criminal behavior in ways that don't use incarceration. From truth and reconciliation commissions that have been used in war-torn societies to there are many radical organizations of color in this country who try to think, especially feminist organizations that try to think through, well, what do we do about wife battering? What do we do about domestic violence? What do we do about rape when we don't want to turn to the cops to arrest the people in our communities because the cops aren't friends of people of color communities? And so there's work going on in this direction, and maybe this goes back to the theme of what you addressed, having to do with race and Occupy, like how can Occupy is whiter than the 99%, and how can we connect with those people? Well, maybe we can join in this work of thinking through a new way of living, which is actually work that's already going on. When we are friends with the criminal legal system, we're not friends with the people who are not friends with it. So we're not friends with people of color, I think, is one lesson to draw.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else.
Does anybody else have a comment?
Yeah. Just what?
I just had a observation about.
Hold it closer.
Speak louder.
I just had an observation about increased social alienation or isolation. It's part of the problem, where we don't know each other. We're not involved with each other. We can't, have relationships. And I think that's the model that's evolved, is everybody to stick to themselves. And I think this kind of movement is so important because it's about, repairing some of that, working together.
I don't know if you heard what she said, but I think it's I'd like to say that one of the things that the society does is isolates us from each other, alienates us, and that this movement is about building community. I think that's crucially important. What we have, one of my favorite political posters that I've ever seen years ago, I think it was from France, was an aerial photograph of a soccer match. And the caption was 22 players, 90,000 spectators, modern society. And I think what this movement represents and similar efforts represents is an effort to overcome that alienation and to develop community. And I think therein lies the hope of the future. We collectively can solve all these problems. Individually, none. Drops of water turn the mill. Singly, none.
Okay, let's give them a hand, guys. Some excellent questions and some things to point out. I think Doug's got some things to point out. I think promote the rest of the Zinn series.
We got coming up on Thursday at, I believe, 5 o'clock is Rick Wolf on economic crisis. We have Paul LeBlanc. He's coming on Friday at 5, I believe. And coming up in the next few weeks is Michael Denning, Bruno Bastiles, and Norman Finkelstein. Check zinnlectures.wordpress.com for more information. Thank you.
I would just add that tomorrow, not through Howard Zinn, but through the Free School University, Jyoti Puri, who's a professor at Simmons is going to be giving a talk on gender, citizenship, and the economy, which I think is not worth missing at 4 o'clock here. So I'd recommend coming to that too.